أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أفضل الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. Now, alhamdulillah, we're going to talk about a very touchy issue that some of us can actually go extreme in. Inshallah ta'ala, we're going to have a guest with us, Elder Malik Muhammad, discussing this issue of African American culture and struggle according to, in the light of Quran and Sunnah. And Sheikh, you got to tap an icon down at the bottom where it should have like a face or something. Some type of face. And you can push that and then it should show you it should show a green camera. I should see able to see a green camera, then I can touch your icon and you can come up on the camera part. Sheikh. But anyway, this talk is going to consist of talking about the issues of African Americans. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He recognizes our shared humanity in Surah An-Nisa, that we come from, many men and women came from a male and a female, Adam and his wife, alayhim salam. But Allah also recognizes that we are different tribes and different cultures and colors and languages to get to know one another. He also mentions that. Sheikh Malik Muhammad, you gotta be able to. It should be something that comes up. It should be a green camera or a green face or something at the bottom where you put messages at on your Facebook. When you go to the icons, it'll be something that you gotta push there so you can come into the video. I don't know if you can you type and let me know if you see it? Or can anybody give us some info on how he should be able to come into the video? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. If you're on your laptop, it should be at the bottom where you can. It should be at the bottom where you see, like when you push when you like it, you put a thumbs up or a heart. It should be there. No, it's not a camera. It should be like a face. Yeah, and the icon. It's not a camera. It's like a face. Some type of green face or something like that. Down at the bottom. Do you see it? Well, can anybody type and explain exactly what he should be looking for? But because some of the questions we'll be asking will be, how do we understand black oppression?
You want me to do it?
In America?
You want me to do it?
For him?
I know. Let me put him on here. I'll do it. Let me do it. Hold on.
How do we understand black oppression? What is African American culture? What are the limits in loving and being an African American culture and a Muslim at the same time? Oh, that's funny. Yes. How, as black Muslims, should we view white privilege? Is it a real thing? And how do we deal with the relationship in history between whites and blacks in the United States of America, according to Islam? I'm not talking about no extremism with Pan-Africanism or Nation of Islam extremism. We're not talking about no racial extremism. How do we as Muslims, according to what was revealed, understand all these concepts? Because being black, or being Muslim, doesn't erase being African American. Being Muslim does not erase the reality of our reality in the states of America. We have a reality here that's a clear reality. I remember when this Caucasian guy, he did an interview. Well, he did a study. He lined up a bunch of white kids and a bunch of black children, and he started asking them about things they had in their life. Private schools, private teachers, never missed a meal, had money in the bank, yada, on and on and on and on. All the white kids stepped forward, and almost none of the black children or Hispanic children stepped forward. And then he said, if this was a race of life, who would win? If I shot the gun in the air right now and the race started, who would win? Who would win? You already have such an advantage. They were halfway. Before he started asking questions, they was halfway through the. Oh, okay, he got it.
It's live. Is it working?
And he said something about it just came up by him wanting to be in a video. Okay, I got it.
Is it working?
Hold on, man. It says adding. So I guess it came up. He said he wants to be in your video.
So I said it.
I did. I said, yeah, he's in. Shukran. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam rahmatullah.
Alhamdulillah. What's going on, Sheikh?
Hey, what's going on, Akh?
I'm glad to finally at least see you somewhat in person.
Yeah. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. So I was just giving the people some back. This is our brother, our elder Malik Muhammad. He's going to be answering these questions. I'm just going to be the moderator, everyone. You're more than welcome, if it's okay with you, Sheikh, that they can also send some questions pertaining to the issues here.
I'll do the best I can.
Okay. So everybody see what we're about to do here, because there are extremisms in this issue, and I see it on Facebook. That's what made me come up in my mind that being Muslim does not negate being African American, and we still have to deal with some of those realities every day.
Absolutely.
So, the first question we have for you, Sheikh, is how do we understand black oppression and what goes along with that according to our religion? How do we understand it? Because we know that Allah does recognize our shared humanity with everybody else as African Americans,
Right.
but He also speaks about tribes and nations. So He also
Right.
Allah also recognizes that we're different in our languages and our color and our culture, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But how do we understand black oppression according to our faith, and how do we deal with that as black Muslims, because we're not separated from our people when it comes to that type of oppression?
First things first. Just call me Abu Abdurrahman or Malik. You don't.
Okay.
No sheikh. No sheikh.
Right.
When we look at oppression in reference to African American experience,
Mm-hmm.
it has to be, or we have to understand that it's systemic and institutional. So we hear these terms, systemic and institutional, often. My question is, do we really understand what that means? Do we understand the difference between systemic and institutional and how those two work together? Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay. Institutions are like your criminal justice system, your educational system, your healthcare system, your you know what I mean? Boy, like the Wu-Tang Clan.
Yeah, I know.
anyway, your all of the institutions that make up the society. Again, criminal justice, housing, your education system, all of these institutions that make up the workings of the society, that make the society go forward. That's institutions.
Yeah.
Systems are, or systemic oppression is viewed as all those institutions work in conjunction with each other to produce asymmetrical outcomes for a particular group, be it African Americans or a specific class. So it produces uneven outcomes, and these institutions work together in conjunction. So that's the difference between systemic, when a person talks about systemic oppression versus institutional oppression. Each individual institution has its own way that it gets down. You understand what I'm saying? The norms and the practices within these institutions, what happens is they restrict access to resources. They divert resources to the people who they want to have it and divert it away from the people that they don't want to have it. So it also works by way of media. Media works in conjunction with these institutions as well by way of stereotypes. So each institution, again, plays a part in the systemic oppression of a specific group. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Now, the next thing I will say, what are some of the results of that oppression that you yourself clearly see that's lingering with the African American people, that even the African American Muslim, even though he came into Iman, still has to struggle with? What are some of the consequences of that type of oppression?
Well, what needs to be understood is that racism has been a ubiquitous force within this country since its inception, forever. It's always been here. Racism, systemic oppression. This oppression changes or morphs with the time. So now the oppression that we have to deal with now is more covert versus overt. Back in the day, back during the slavery day, we were all, we were called the N-word, we were lynched, we were, beat, families were destroyed. That's your overt racism. Over time, the tactic of oppression or racism changes. It has changed. After slavery, are you familiar with the black codes or the black laws?
No.
Okay. Black codes or black laws were when slavery ended and blacks were released, they had nowhere to go. So they were just in the cities, they were in the country, they were just out and about. They didn't have anywhere to go. So what happened was the law said, you know something? Although these people are now free, we still need somebody to work this land. We still need people to harvest this tobacco. We still need people to get on this cotton and make this stuff happen for us. So what do? They created black codes and black laws. So what they would do is law enforcement would see you and arrest you for loitering. They would arrest you for being homeless. They would arrest you for if you were caught maybe stealing bread or littering. I mean, minor offenses. What they would do is they would put you in prison. The slave owners or the people who own the land would then rent you out from the jail to work off your debt to society back on the plantation.
So you basically was a free slave.
Yep. So they went from slavery to black codes. The black codes put you back on the plantation for free to work off your debt that you for being homeless, or for loitering. You standing on the corner talking to your friend, and the police roll up and arrest you, put you in prison. They tell you that your fine is some exorbitant amount of money and you can't pay it. So what do? You're going to work it off. Where are you going to work it off at? On the plantation. Hop on back on the plantation. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
from the black codes, we went into Jim Crow. Jim Crow was another form of overt racism. Only whites can drink here. Only blacks have to ride in the back of the bus, and all of these different Jim Crow laws that most of us are familiar with. If you didn't adhere to that, that would get you locked up, right? That's again the overt type of racism. Now we've moved into an era of mass incarceration, and this is where we're at right now. Michelle Alexander, who is an Ohio State law professor, she has an excellent book that I'm sure many of the people listening are familiar with. It's called The New Jim Crow. It has a very long title, but just look up the New Jim Crow. And she expiates in the book how the racism has morphed over time and how it has changed, but the end result is still the same, or systemic oppression. So now with African Americans and mass incarceration, they put you in jail for minor drug offenses. You get the title felon on your record, and felon has replaced the N-word.
Yeah.
So now it's not the N-word. Oh, you a felon. Same thing. When white folks see that on that resume or on your job application, oh, okay, we already know, right? So with the term felon, you don't have access once you get out of prison. You don't have access to housing. You can't get government housing, Section 8. You can't get food stamps. You can't get money for education. You can't get all these things that you need to get back on your feet. So what happens? You get frustrated. You go back where? Commit a crime and go back into the system.
Yeah.
So it's a cycle, how they keep us in the system. How does that affect the Muslims? I think there is this idea that many of us have that as soon as we say Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, everything is butterflies and rainbows.
Yeah, exactly.
All sicknesses, all pathologies, all problems that you have will just magically go away. And that's just not reality. The issue is the sicknesses, the pathologies, the problems that we have as African Americans is filtered into the Muslim community. We bring that stuff with us like luggage.
Yeah, exactly.
And that stuff is not it's not easy to get to fix. And it's something that has affected us in specific. Our history as African Americans in this country is unique. And I don't know of any other people who have the same history that we have and have to deal with the same things that we have had to deal with historically. One thing that I wanted to touch on is when we look at culture, okay? When we look at immigrants who come from Pakistan, they come from Korea, they come from Saudi Arabia, they come from wherever they're from, they bring with them a connection to a landmass. That connection to that landmass is their roots, right? That's where they derive their culture from, their language, their food, their style of clothing, their do's and don'ts amongst themselves, what's going to fly and what's not going to fly. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, I understand.
They bring that with them. With that, when they move from whatever country they're from to America or to England or wherever they go, it creates what's called a collective efficacy. A collective efficacy is a feeling of safety amongst your people. It's a feeling of, or an understanding amongst the people that we're going to look out for each other. If I'm living next to you and I see somebody strange walking up your driveway and I know you're not home, I'm gonna go out and ask, can I help you? What's going on? If I see your children down the street doing something that they don't have any business doing, I'm gonna snatch them up and bring them back to your house and say, hey, this is what I saw.
Now, I
This is
seen that
collective
too.
efficacy.
It's true because
Huh?
when I was in Egypt, they did it. It was when you lived in Egypt, the whole neighborhood would chastise your child. They still live
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. So this is it's called collective efficacy, and through this collective efficacy, social cohesion amongst that group is created. That's how these people survive. That's
Yeah.
how these people, fight off that oppression and deal with the stereotypes and deal with the lack of resources and things. They share amongst themselves. I'm hungry. I know you need something. I'm gonna call you over. I'm gonna help feed you. We all take care of each other. Collective efficacy. In the African American community, that's very, very, very limited. And it's very limited because we don't have that connection to any particular landmass. We don't have a culture that's connected to a landmass other than what we have here in America. And the culture that we have here in America, the question, some people would say, well, are you saying that African Americans don't have a culture? Of course not. We have a culture, but that culture is created right here. And many
Yeah.
times we don't necessarily have control of the hegemony over us.
Mm.
We don't have control over that. We live through the stereotypes. We live through our experiences, and we create survival modes or
So,
tactics.
so would you say that the African American culture is like a Frankenstein culture, meaning it's pieced together from our reality in America. We took it from here, we took it from there, we took it from this one. Some of it was manufactured, some of it was given to us, like hip hop, for
Absolutely.
example, the rap
Yeah,
culture, stuff like that.
Dr. Ronald Jackson is a professor at the University of Cincinnati, and he deals specifically with culture and African American experience. He's done a lot of work in black masculinity. What is black masculinity? How do we learn to be masculine as black men? He's done a lot of work in that field. And one of his books that I had to study in graduate school, he talked about how some of the things that we as African Americans do have direct connections to traditional African practices. The
Hmm.
problem is we don't know that. We don't. If you ask some of the African Americans why we do what we do, they don't know. They don't know where it came from. It's just always been a part of us. But people who do this type of research have traced some of our practices back to the landmass. You
Yeah,
understand what I mean?
I'm,
But
I'm,
but we're not conscious of that.
we're
All
cut
we
off.
know is just right. All we know is that's what we do.
Yeah, exactly.
But we're cut off from the actual origins of why we do what we do, um, culturally.
Yeah.
Um, Dr. James M. Jones is a professor of sociology at the University of Delaware, and he broke racism down into three levels: institutionalized, personally mediated, and internalized. So what happens is the system is set up, again, asymmetrical to create uneven and unequal outcomes for a particular group
Mm.
that the people want to oppress, the people who have money, the elites, right? And then as an individual, you deal with the byproduct, or the product rather, of that institutionalized racism. You deal with it by way of the law enforcement or uh, substandard education for your children or yourself. You deal with it by way of substandard health care, whatever the case may be. You deal with it by way of being bombarded with negative stereotypes about your own people.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
at that point, it becomes internalized and you begin to believe it, and then you begin to perpetuate or self-perpetuate the lifestyle or the image that was thrust upon you in the beginning. Does that make sense?
We're basically lab rats.
You know, I would say we're past that point now. Now they know what they're working with.
Exactly.
They know how to make us move in the direction in which they want us to move. You know what I mean? They know how to do that now. Right. So now we're past that. Yeah, oh yeah. They figured us out. And unfortunately, we haven't figured that out.
Yeah.
Because many times we are in survival mode. Many times we're in survival mode where many of us are going paycheck to paycheck, hand to mouth, and don't really have time to take a breath to look at why these situations are the way they are. Why do we have a lack of generational wealth? Why don't I have income or homes or resources to pass on to my children when I pass away? Versus the white dude down the street, you know, he's got a couple houses, he's got some precious metals, he has all these things that he can pass down to his children. Passing down to his children, or having the ability to pass these things down to your children, gives your children an automatic leg up versus those who don't have that. Our children are starting from scratch every time, for the most part. You know what I mean? Right. We don't have the ability to create that generational wealth and that social upward mobility.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean to cut you. The fact that you brought that up. I had this conversation with a brother before. I want to see what you think about it. And what we were talking about, we were saying that this goes along with what you're saying now. There seems to be, or it is, no doubt about it, that there's a plan and a situation or a plot to keep African Americans from ever establishing themselves financially or politically or have a voice in this country. And one of the things that we were talking about is that so people say, oh, well, the Chinese come, the Arabs come, the Somalians come, everybody comes, they open up strip malls, they have wealth, they have resources, they get together, they establish something for themselves. Wherever community you go to, they take over the community, right?
Right.
And we seem to never, our curl never curls all the way over,
Right.
So one of the things that we were talking about is that it seems the government, for some reasons, doesn't want us to ever do that. And one of the things that I said, well, because if the foreigners come here and ever get wealth, too much wealth and too strong, they can always send these guys back home. But if we ever got to that point, they can't send us back home because they have to live with us. So it's like we can't let these people ever get smart enough to get enough resources, because then they can challenge our authority here. So, because the reality is that what are you going to do with African Americans? You're going to put us on 80 million of us on a ship and ship us where? So
right.
I just want to know what you thought about that.
Well, one of the reasons that these immigrants, again, can come over here and do what they do is collective efficacy. They have a connection and they have something that creates for them a communal cohesion. Do you understand what I'm saying? So one of the things that I read about a while back was when these different groups spend money amongst themselves, that money will rotate in their own community, 10, 15, 20 times before it goes outside the community. Yeah. Everyone in that community, will benefit by way of patronizing businesses and keeping that money tight. Whereas with African Americans, many times we get money, we got to get them Jordans. We got to get the rims. You know what I mean? I got to go to the club and make it rain and all of that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? So,
oh man, yeah.
How we understand economics and how we understand economics, how we understand keeping that money tight, keeping that money, using that money for our own growth, for our communities, is something that we, many times we don't have a clue, especially when I speak to some of the younger African Americans. When I speak to some of them, they're just like, I work with a guy and he's just like, man, when I was in high school, if you didn't have the flyest Jordans, or you didn't have this, you didn't have that, everyone would ridicule you.
Exactly.
So I don't want to be ridiculed. So I'm not saving that money. I'm going to buy Jordan so that people are not on me. So we have been relegated to materialism. It is through materialism that we define manhood. We define who's live and who's not, who's lit, who's not. Based on what they have. Dude got a Benz, or he live, or
Exactly.
whatever the case may be. Whereas with some of these other groups, they're not really concerned with that. They'll have 2 or 3 or 4 families living in a house, and they'll all wake up in the morning and go work at the shop until they can build up enough to buy another shop. Then they split, and then that family, and they keep that going, and they build up. Right.
Yeah.
We don't have that mode of thinking, and I really do believe that that's derived from that social efficacy, and it's derived from that connection to a homeland, and which is something that we don't have. Now, the flip side to that, what will correct all of the ills of society, black, white, Asian, Indian, whoever? We all understand it to be Islam.
Yeah.
And the proper application. See, many times we've heard from some of the du'at that are here in the West, Tawheed, 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 Tawheed. Tawheed is cool, no doubt. It's a must. It's what makes us Muslim. But how do I apply that to my paycheck hand to mouth? How do I apply that when I'm fresh out of prison and I have nowhere to turn, nowhere to go? How do I apply that when I look out in my community and I see dilapidated buildings and drug dealers and pimps and all of that? How do I apply that? It's the application of Islam that will correct all these things. Like you said in the beginning, you said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us into nations and tribes so that we may get to know one another.
Exactly.
This speaks to different groups having individual cultures and mores and norms and food and dress and all these things, and variety is the spice of life, right?
Yeah.
Because we are in the situation that we're in, I feel like we are open to explore and take other aspects of other cultures that we like.
Exactly.
If I want to dress in a Khaliji thobe with an imama one day, I may do that. If I want to dress in a Malaysian baju kurung like what I have on right now, I wish you could see it, I'll do that. If I want to dress as a West African tomorrow, I'll do that. We have the ability to not be relegated to one style of anything. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I think that gives us the opportunity to move more freely than some other groups. Imagine seeing a Saudi dressed like a brother from Mali. People would look at him like, what is he doing?
Yeah.
But if you come dressed that same way, it's all good.
It's all good.
If you come dressed like a Saudi the next day, or somebody from Bahrain or wherever, it's all good.
The African American, we know how to put flavor in almost everything.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. We're going to look fly either way.
Yeah.
We're going to look fly either way.
Now,
So, go ahead.
Now, it's one of the things is that how do we now understand being oppressed by white people in this country? When I say that, I'm not talking about the Muslim brothers, because I don't want nobody getting on here saying, oh, he's attacking white people. We got Muslims that's white. I don't think we should have to make that disclaimer. Nobody exactly know what we mean here. So how should we as Muslims view the Caucasian tribe that is in power here, that has done the things they have done? Some of these things are atrocities, and some of them are still ongoing. So how should we view them when we're dealing with them on a daily basis? You have the ones that's in power. You have the everyday Caucasian. You have the Caucasian at your job. Like, for example, we get on elevators. How many of us have felt that uneasiness between us and them? She grabs her thing a little tighter, or the white guy doesn't want to look at you in your face. It's that uneasiness of black and white in America. So, how should we deal with that relationship? That's a reality. And this kufi and this thobe does not change the reality of the uneasiness between white and black.
If anything, it makes it worse.
Mm.
If
Yeah,
anything, because
yeah,
when they see you and you dress like that and you black, it's a double hit.
yeah. It's a double hit. Yeah.
You're getting it from both directions. What I would say to that is we have to understand what white privilege is.
Mm.
White privilege is to not have to worry about these things. White privilege is to have the police pull up behind you and you don't fear for your life. Hey, Mr. Officer. Hey, Ted, how you doing? It's all good.
Yeah.
White privilege is not have to concern yourself with systemic oppression because you're not the recipient of it. You're on the good end of it. This is white privilege.
Yeah.
So many times, this white privilege is unconscious to them.
Yeah.
I don't believe, unlike some people, I know some brothers are like, yeah, all white people are, they all the devil, blah, blah. No, I don't believe that. Allah doesn't say that in the Quran. But
Exactly.
unfortunately, we are a product of our environment.
Mm.
So the majority of white people are a product of this white privilege. Sometimes it's conscious, sometimes it's unconscious. So how do we deal with them? We have to go back to the mannerisms of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from the book and the Sunnah, because it is through that Allah will bless us or bless whoever decides to walk that path with success. Sometimes we act like racism started here or oppression started with us here in America. There was racism and oppression during the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Yep.
Right. And he didn't eradicate it in his time.
Exactly.
He didn't dead it. So we shouldn't think that we're going to dead it in this time. If anything, it's going to get worse.
Yeah, exactly.
These isms are going to get worse. But as Allah said that he perfected our religion. It is through the application of our religion that we can overcome these systemic and institutional obstacles. It's through our attitude and our dealings. I mean, if you look at how the Muslims in Southeast Asia became Muslims, how they become Muslims.
Yeah.
They became Muslims through the merchants who came through there who had good character.
Yeah. Well,
They came
racism.
through it.
Adam and Iblis, racism happened right there.
It happened
right there.
I read a piece that said that by the year 2050, and you can go look at it. It's an old National Geographic magazine. It said that by the year 2050, it had a picture of what the average American will look like, and it was a person of color. The person was light skinned, had light eyes, had curly, wavy hair, but it was obviously a person of color.
Mm-hmm.
When I did my graduate school, I had an oral exam that I had to give between the head of the department and another African-American professor. And I told them, even if the majority of Americans look like that, we will still find a way to divide. It'll be green eyes versus brown eyes.
Yeah, we will.
It'll be curly hair versus the afro. It'll be light skin versus dark skin. So these isms that we deal with in society will always be here in some way, shape, fashion, or form, but it's through Islam and through our practice of that and through perfecting good manners and good character and perfecting the understanding of Tawheed and application that we can overcome all of these different isms. Go ahead. I'm sorry. You were going to say something.
Two things. The proof of what you're saying, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he mentioned the translation. In translation, he mentioned that mankind will differ except for those Allah have mercy on. So differing is the actual attribute of human beings.
Yeah.
And I seen this video, man. I think I said it before, maybe in this video. There's a guy, man. He did this. He was a Caucasian white guy. He did this thing. He had white kids and black kids and some Mexican, Spanish kids line up in a line. and he
Mm-hmm.
started reading off all these benefits in life. Who had a private teacher, a private school, who never was hungry, who parents lived in nice neighborhoods, and all the white kids got halfway to the end of the soccer field, and all the black kids and Hispanic kids still didn't make one move.
Let me tell you something.
That shows the
When I
privilege.
was when I was in undergrad, when I was doing my bachelor's degree, our professor took us out in the hallway
Mhm.
and lined everybody up. And she began to ask us questions. It was the same exact test. Who had a maid? Who had a nanny? Who went to private school? Whose parents make over 100,000, 200,000, 300,000? Who has vacationed out of the country? Who has gone to private school all their life? Who has a gardener? So when you answered the questions, you took a step forward. You took a step forward. By the end of the class, when we finished this little experiment, she said, turn around and look. And it was all of us Negroes standing back in the back looking at them.
Yeah, I know.
I was like, I mean,
know,
it was, and you should have seen their experience, how they reacted to it.
They didn't
When we
realize
went back into the,
they didn't
yeah,
realize.
look, when we went back to the class, the one girl said, I didn't realize, and she was serious. She said, I didn't realize everyone didn't have a maid.
Mm.
She said, I didn't realize everybody didn't have a gardener. She was like, who doesn't have that? Who doesn't have that? I don't.
Yeah,
I'm
I
from the
don't.
west side. Bro, I'm from the west side of Detroit.
Yeah.
We don't have,
You know
ain't
what I
nothing to
had?
garden over there.
Powdered milk, powdered eggs,
Yeah.
the canned peanut butter, welfare cheese.
Hey, bro. I mean, but again, this is that covert, unconscious white privilege that many of them have. So the way to overcome that is through the perfection of your deen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the tools to be successful. You know, we act almost as if Allah didn't know that we were going to be here in America, that there was going to be systemic and institutional racism, that all this stuff wasn't going to exist for us, right? So he didn't give us the tools in order to deal with that. That doesn't make sense. Everything that we need to be successful is found within the Kitab and the Sunnah. You know, as a sociologist, sociology is my field of study.
No, alhamdulillah.
Everything that I learn through sociology is filtered through an Islamic lens.
Exactly.
Does that make sense? So I
Yes.
filter it because I'm telling you, sociology is a dangerous science. It's dangerous.
Yeah.
It's filled with homosexuality. It's filled with deviance. It's filled with atheism. So needless to say, in some of my classes, I was an unpopular cat to the point to where I would just sit there. Like, it was better for me to just not say something, not say anything, not challenge. And I would just sit in some of my classes and just keep my mouth shut because I wanted to graduate.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
But
Sometimes
they
you
know
have
Islam
to.
has the answers. They know Islam has the answers.
Of course. Of course. You know, but again, I would advise everyone to look into this phenomenon, this agenda that's being pushed. It's called postmodernism.
Mm.
And there's another one called moral relativism. Moral relativism says that there is no truth, truth that doesn't change. All truth is subjective. All truth changes over time. So it is it's through this understanding that they negate God. They say God doesn't exist because we know that God is what he is. And he has established the haqq because he's the creator of the haqq. He's the creator of everything. So when we look for the criteria or the gauge for what's correct, what's incorrect, what's permissible, what's not permissible, we look to Allah. They say, well, no, there is no source of haqq. There is no source of truth, that it's all subjective. And this is how they push the homosexual agenda by saying, who are you to judge them? That's how they were created. That's how they not created. That's how they were born.
Mm-hmm.
So who are you to judge the homosexual community, the LBGTQ community, right? Well, we judge them by the Islamic standard because we understand that to be the haqq.
Exactly.
So they deny the creator in this postmodernism, moral relativist mode of thinking. And I'm telling you, it is prevalent in academia. It is huge. It's huge on TV. Everywhere you look, you see one of them.
Exactly. Now,
go ahead.
This is gonna go into another question that's on here. There's two extremes that we deal with as far as African Americans, our culture, especially for the Muslim African American. One extremism is that you don't want to fall into nationalism or Pan-Africanism. You don't want to fall into thinking that everything's about African Americans, and then you negate the fact that we have a shared humanity, like in Surah An-Nisa, that everybody comes from Adam and Eve, right?
And that's huge. A lot of us fall into that. Everything is about black. Right. And not to cut you off, but some things that we may perceive as racism is actually classism. Because the elites of the society, that 1%, they're not concerned with black folks like that. They're concerned with the maintenance of money, power, and wealth.
Exactly.
That means they will oppress a poor white just like they would oppress a poor black.
Yeah, they do. They do.
They've sort of transcended the issue of race and will use race many times as a tactic to achieve their own ends.
Exactly.
They'll use it as a tactic. And because many of us are, I want to say laymen, and everything we see and any type of oppression that tends to hit us or that we see, we just chalk it up. Well, that's racism. And we have to learn to think a little deeper than that, because sometimes it's not racism. Sometimes it's about that money.
I'll give you an example. The neighborhood we lived in Philly, we called it Gotham City, right? It's in North Philly.
I always wondered where you got that from.
Oh, yeah. We called it Gotham City because, man, it's Heroin Lane, so we call it Gotham City. It's funny, man. But anyway, right? And it's always dark and gloomy like Gotham in the comic books, right? But there are a very large poor Irish community there, along with the African Americans and the Hispanics. And the poor Irish community, that's the original people of that community. But then as the factories left, as the crime entered, they got on drugs. The original Irish community, they got into gangs, the Irish mafia. And then the blacks moved in, the Hispanics moved in, they fought for territory. Then after the fight was over, everybody's on drugs, so everybody mixed into each other and things like that. And we see them going through the same struggle: welfare, broken homes, gangs, being shot, being on drugs. So just to bring to your point is that those at the very top don't see them no different than they see me. It's all about keeping a status quo.
Exactly.
Exactly.
The elite of the society, this is not the first time. Historically, they've used whites, poor whites, to do their bidding, meaning divide and conquer. There was a time when the Irish in America were the black folks. They were treated like black folks, so to speak.
Yeah, they were.
I'm talking about the Irish. They were mistreated. They were denied access to resources. They couldn't go to the same schools as regular old white American kids. They were beat up and, the whole nine.
Yeah.
So what happened was, when industrialization hit, and it was the ability to move from the rural areas into the city, and the issue of working in factories and jobs and automation began to take off, and jobs were becoming more scarce, they would take white folks, tell them, like, look, the reason you don't have jobs is because of them black folks. Now, we're all living in the same ghetto. We all poor and broke. But they would use them to take the heat off of themselves. And I'll bring it up to a more modern time. There is a video that everybody can watch on YouTube. It's called Humans Need Not Apply. And it's about how technology is taking over jobs that were once jobs of low wage, low income workers working in McDonald's, different jobs like this that we would consider lower wage jobs. With these jobs working in factories, these jobs are now being taken over by automation. So now you're going to have whites, blacks, Hispanics, and everybody that are going to be hit when this automation goes full blown. So what's one way that they could tell, or one way that they can keep the heat off of themselves? They're not going to tell the people, no, these jobs are actually being taken over by robots who don't take days off, don't get sick, don't get pregnant, don't complain. They will go and they will tell whites, well, you know something? It's the black and immigrant people's fault that you don't have a job. To keep the heat off of themselves. So they'll keep us infighting over issues of race, where the issue is not race, it's economics. Does that make sense?
Exactly.
So they'll, sometimes race is just a tool. It's not necessarily the sought after outcome or end. I want to oppress those people in specific. No, it could be like, we need to do this in order to maintain this money, power, and wealth. Let's use race as a tool, sometimes just for the status quo, like you said before.
Okay. All right. Now going into, so now my second part of that.
Hey, bro, give me 1 second. I'm gonna turn the light on. It's kind of dark in here. I know y'all can't see me. I look like Batman over here.
Yeah, look like you're in Gotham City, man. Okay. This will lead into one of my questions that I have written down. The second thing is that we have another extreme where they make it seem like it's a crime to love being African American or to love your people. So we have the one extreme where everything is about black people, and we're treading the line between being Muslim or Pan-Africanist or nationalistic. But there's a whole nother extreme where it's like, okay, being Muslim, I don't have to care about the fact that I'm African American. When you wake up, put your pants on, you go outside, they still look at you as such, and the cops still look at you as such. You're still in the same economic problems. You're still in the same racial problems, as if being Muslim, this stove has now shielded me from being black. So, so we have that extreme. So my thing is now, what are the limits in loving and being African American and loving our culture and being Muslim at the same time? And I think that's a very important thing.
Okay. What did Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam say about extremism? He said that we were the ummah upon what? The middle course.
Middle course.
So even in love of self, we have to be moderate in that. Because what will happen is we'll become like the people that have oppressed us. We'll become mentally oppressive, not only to them, but to ourselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We have to maintain, again, the middle course in that. The love can't be to where I don't want white Muslims praying in my masjid because, we all black over here. I don't want no Pakistanis praying in my masjid over here. This is us. This is black masjid. You understand what I'm saying? The love for self has to be moderate. And I know I keep saying that, but I can't think of a better way to word it. It has to be moderate. It can't be overboard either way. I know people who hate themselves, who hate their skin color. And because of that, they're self-loathing. They're self-destructive. I've known brothers who are darker skinned that say, when they're looking for a wife, well, I don't want nobody as dark as me. These kinds of statements are statements of self-hate. But on the flip side, I know brothers that be like, man, I would never marry no white woman. Well, akhi, if she's a good Muslimah and she's upon the haqq and she's going to teach your children and maintain the tenets and keep your house peaceful, then her skin color is not an issue. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I like somebody said, I don't understand what is too much love for race. Meaning, I'll give you an example. I don't love you, brother Malik, Abu Abdurrahman, because you're black. I love you because you're Muslim. Now, your being African American is just another type of connection that we are the same, and so we kind of vibe a little closer than I would with somebody from China. Okay, but at the end of the day, if you change purple, I would still love you. Right. So that's the thing, and somebody say they don't understand what's too much love for race, is that I can't love you just because of race. You know what I'm saying? And I can't love you because if that's the case, then I have to love the non-Muslim African American. And I can't meaning I can't my love for him has to be based on my love for him has to be based on Quran and Sunnah, meaning I want good for him. I want him to accept Islam. I would want him to economically and politically have some strength. I don't want him to live in ghettos and slums, but at the same time, if this Muslim African American and this non-Muslim African American, I had to choose, the non-African American Muslim loses out every time of the week.
Yep.
Because my love for them is not because they're African American, not initially. So it has to be because of Iman, because at the end of the day, the Sahaba fought their own family members. They were Arabs.
Right. Right. That's absolutely correct. That's absolutely correct. The bottom line is the barometer for truth is going to be this deen, regardless of skin color. I've been in situations where a white Muslim held me down. Something was going on. A white Muslim held me down, and it wasn't the skin color that built that bond. It was Islam. When I was in Egypt, I would go, a brother would have an aqiqah or a brother would have some kind of event. And one of the things that amazed me was how many different ethnicities and races and cultures would all be in one room eating from the same food. Although we were different, what unified us? Islam. Islam is what unified us. So the skin color, the difference in ethnicity and stuff was not even, it wasn't an issue. I know brothers that would marry their, white Muslims, French Muslims, Muslims from Germany that were marrying their daughters and sisters off the dark-skinned Africans. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly. So Islam, if Islam is practiced properly, it overcomes all of those man-made isms. Mm-hmm. You understand what I mean? So at the end of the day, the love should be for the Muslim based on the fact that he's Muslim, not his skin color. The skin color is something secondary. The skin color, I don't view every black person I see as my brother. I don't. Mm-hmm. Why don't I? Because that dude he may hate Muslims and want to kill my family.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Just the fact that he's black.
Who drops bombs on, like the black guy in the military who drops bombs on Muslims and kills Muslims, rape Muslim women. So I have to be connected with him?
Yeah, exactly. So the skin color is an initial connection. It's an initial connection. We have possibly a shared or collective experience. We may have experienced some of the same things based on our skin color, but at the end of the day, if you're a kafir, you're a kafir. And I deal with you as such. Exactly.
Like, I'll give you an example. Like, no doubt about it, when I see African Americans, obviously, I feel a closeness to them because, like you said, a shared experience, a shared history, a shared culture. Like, for example, I can go to African American anywhere in America and talk slang from my own city. He can follow along with me. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and we vibe, and we back in the day we listened to Biggie and Tupac, and we lived in the hood, the project. So we have these things to talk about and these connections. And one of the brothers said about racial esteem or racial esteem. Yeah, obviously you want good for everybody. Like, it wouldn't make sense, for example, for all the African people to come here, to leave all the resources that all in Africa, which has some of the best resources in the world, come here and help this country economically and socially, and then leave alone their own lands and building their own country. That doesn't make sense to me. Like, for example, Sheikh Uthaymeen said it doesn't make sense for a Muslim to leave his Muslim land and his people to come here and to build this economically and never go back and help build his own community economically. So yeah, we should have some want good for people in our particular tribe, but I can't believe that I only need to help my particular tribe, because once you start thinking like that, you go down the slippery slope. You know,
without doubt. I mean, we will relegate Islam to just our people, and when we talk about, you know, the African American experience, and we talk about our shared history and the oppression that we have felt, why would we then turn around and oppress others?
Exactly.
Why would we do that? Like, that makes you no better in reality than the people who oppressed you initially. I do believe in love of self.
Yeah.
I do believe in a moderate love of my own people. But when we look at this term, my own people, Allah says that a Muslim is a brother to another Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
So that supersedes the racial connection that we may have. I know some brothers, they're so immersed in this blackness that if they saw a group of African American men maybe, you know, jumping on and beating on an Arab or a white Muslim, they may not go help them. They may not go help that Muslim because, well, I mean, those black dudes, they my brothers too, and I, you know. So how they understand brotherhood is twisted. It's incorrect, and it's overboard.
Yeah, no, yeah. Well, to answer the question that came up, no, the Prophet ﷺ did start with his own people. But when you say your own people, I listen. The thing is this: he was surrounded by nothing but Arabs. There was no other people there. America is not like that. Okay, America is not a group of people. It's a nationality more so than a color and a race. And it's only three races. It's the angels, the jinn, and mankind. So humans don't have races. We have tribes. So
race is a social construct.
Exactly. It was created by a group of people who wanted to oppress and divide other people. So, but this is the thing. So starting with our own people, America has to be deemed differently, because everybody that's born in America and has a history here, culturally, we have a culture that is for everybody in America. It's a nationality more so than anything. It's a passport. It's a shared history that's general for everybody. Now you get into the sub tribes that exist in America. Yeah, that's more of a closer knit connection. But at the end of the day, when we say our people, everybody in America is our people. Because when the prophets came to their people, they said, "Oh, my people." And I'm sure that there were different tribes and sub tribes amongst them. So what I'm saying is that obviously I'm going to start in the inner city when I give dawah and trying to build that up, because that's where I'm from. But I do understand that everybody in America is considered to be for my people. But I have a sub tribe and a subculture that I belong to. But I also belong to a general bigger culture, umbrella culture, that is America.
Now, your dawah is going to be more effective in that subculture. Why? Because you're from them. They're going to understand. You're going to understand the experience. You're going to understand, like you say, you know, there's a term called code switching. Are you familiar with this term, code switching?
No.
Okay. When I'm talking or when I'm speaking to my people, like we're talking right now, I'm not speaking the same type of way or the same English that I speak in the classroom when I'm dealing with professors.
Exactly.
When I'm dealing with certain people. You know what I mean? So we code switch. How do I want to put it? Code switching is having the ability to move and articulate yourself acceptably in different levels, different atmospheres, different situations, right? If I'm talking to you, I'm talking to you like this. But if I'm going to a job interview, I'm not going to speak the same way. I'm going to speak more proper, more academic, more, you know, because that's what's expected in that situation. When we give da'wah, there is a level of comfortability in being able to speak to your own people in a way that you're going to be able to make your point and have it received and digested properly.
So it's not just, so meaning is when Allah says he sent the messenger in the language of his people, it just didn't mean the actual language. It also meant culture. It also meant style. It also meant comfortability. Like I look at that ayat when he said he sent them in the language of his people, even though I speak English. But where would I best be effective at inside of on the campus of the University of Pennsylvania or in the ghettos of Philadelphia?
In the hood.
Exactly. Not because I'm any less educated than those people. I could talk to them and they will listen and we can have conversations. Because I had conversations with on college campuses and talking to Caucasian people, Asian people, and things like that. But I had to not only change the way I spoke, my deliverance had to change. So I had to think things out before I said it. But when I'm talking to the ghetto, I'm chilling
code switching
because I already
know
how to talk to them.
That's code switching.
Yeah.
That's code switching right there. That you have the appropriate delivery for the appropriate audience.
Exactly.
So that's something that and part of that is having the information needed to effectively give da'wah and speak to the pathologies and the ills of the people that you're dealing with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know necessarily what ills as a collective rich white folks got to deal with, because I'm not from them.
I don't know.
I mean, like I don't know specifics and details of what gets on their nerves or what stresses them on a daily basis, but I can pretty much tell you what stresses black folks every day.
Yeah, survival.
Same thing that right. It's the same thing that stresses me. You know what I mean? Taking care of family. Hand to mouth many times. I grew up like that. That's just what it is. I understand that. That reality.
What made sense? In the Prophet Salam, Allah, he started with his own people. That made sense. It's not that we start with our own people because I believe that black people are any way better or more deserving of my call. It's just that it doesn't make sense for me to skip over the ghetto and go to the suburbs to give dawah because I don't know anything about them. So even though I speak English with them and we can kick it to a certain level, but my dawah is going to be more effective with the people who I got shared pain with, shared consciousness with, shared anger with, shared ups and downs with, the same real slang and the same culture. So when I talk to them, I can actually break Islam down into their culture. I can break it down in my speech.
Right. I've had people ask me, well, how does this affect me where I live? You have to be able to show them the benefit of Islam and their reality. Because if they can't connect Islam, a better quality of life, and their reality, why should they accept it?
Exactly.
Like, what's going to make them say, you know something? I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna give up weed. I'm gonna give up pork. I'm gonna give up women. I'm gonna live this better lifestyle, and boom, 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 boom. But if they don't see the benefit of doing that, they're like, man, I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing. I have one life, and I'm gonna live it to the fullest. That's the mentality. So when we give this da'wah, it has to be in a way it's going to be received and digested properly. And I do believe that da'wah begins with the people that you know best.
Exactly.
I know black people, I know black people best. So that's what that is. Another issue that we as African Americans deal with, if you take the Islam portion out of it, W.E.B. Du Bois talked about how black people live in a state of double consciousness. And this double consciousness is, again, we have to be one way outside the home in the society that's dominated, that we don't write the laws. We don't write the standards for correctness. We don't write what's socially acceptable and what's not. So we have to conform to that. We have to learn how to be socially mobile and deal with these people and get paychecks and make money in order to provide for our family. But when we are amongst our own people, we may be a different person.
Yeah.
So some will say that this causes a stress, and it's a health risk because it's a constant pressure and a constant stress that we have to deal with as Black people. And again, that speaks to that white privilege. White folks don't have to do that.
They don't.
They are the way they right. They are the way they are wherever they are because they're the dominant culture. Yeah,
you're right. I mean,
so W.E.B. Du Bois.
We have to have conversations with our sons that white people don't have to have. Like I have to have a conversation with my son. Hey, when a cop pulls you over, don't reach for anything.
This is what you do.
When you go outside and you're in a certain neighborhood, you have to be this way. You have to be that way. We're the only people in America who have to we have to create a whole other personality just to exist in this country. So
absolutely.
I'll give you an example. Me personally, I have to be a Muslim and African American. So when I go to work, I have a beard, I have short pants, I have a prostration mark. That carries its own situation. But I'm also African American. I have an accent from up north. I mean, everything about me stands out at the job. So when I'm talking to the African Americans at the job, my speech with them is different. When I have to talk to the Caucasians at my job, you can't even, not just only because they're in power over you, you feel, and not just that part of it, they won't even understand some of the things you're going to say to them. So you have to change your whole language because there's a disconnect between you and them anyway.
Yep. And again, that's that double consciousness that W.E.B. Du Bois was talking about. That is something that most of us as African Americans have to deal with, and white folks don't have a clue. You mentioned having to have the conversation with your son about how to survive an interaction with law enforcement. I've had that same talk with my 13-year-old boy. I've had that same conversation, and I happened to mention it to a white person at my job, and they were like, "Well, why did you have to talk about that?" Like they don't understand why. You know what I mean? They don't understand why. But with all that said, we have to become more educated in how to move successfully in this society, because regardless of whatever, we don't want to live paycheck to paycheck, hand to mouth, and not leave anything for our children and our families. We have to learn how to move in this society and be successful, but still maintain our Islam. Now, one thing that I have noticed, I consider myself Salafi, or upon Salafiyya, upon the Faham of Salaf Salih.
May Allah make us all like Ameen.
Ameen. There, within the Salafi community, there, and you tell me, I don't know about Philly, I'm not from there, but there seems to be this collective aversion to education.
Oh no!
Like
if you're epicenter of the madness.
Yeah. So if you're educated, it's something wrong with that. Like you're sold out, or it's not permissible. Like there is this like being Salafi and being poor and broke are synonymous.
Let me say this to you. I have two questions. The first question is, do you think because we have not been allowed to run our own communities, meaning the African American Salafi is really not in control of his own communities? I mean, the marching orders come from overseas for the most part, and then they give us leaders who are not from us. And I know this may be a thin line between this statement. I'm gonna make sure that it's straight down the middle, so nobody thinks I'm going this way or that way. Because I do believe that whoever you are, if you're on the correct Aqidah, you can teach any community you want. But I think that you look at the African American Salafi community, we're the only ones who are not allowed to really have to run our own communities. Either our imams are not from us, and then they connect us to, I guess, not major scholars or certain types of scholars where certain agendas is pushed on us and certain fatwas pushed on us that may not even fit in our reality. And then you may have somebody give a fatwa saying, this is our leader. He's from Morocco. Or this is our leader. He's from Britain. And you're looking at yourself like, well, we have brothers who are scholars amongst us, like Sheikh Tahir and other than them, and whether it's in Islam or other than that. Like, for example, a scholar can be a PhD in sociology like yourself, or a scholar can be in anything. We have scholars amongst us. They may not be kibar al-imam, but we're talking about scholarly people. It's like a slap in the face. And it's like we don't respect education so much that we're willing to allow someone to totally control us, and then we throw out our scholars out the window who are amongst us to help run our communities. It seems weird.
You know, years ago, man, 100%. Years ago, some years back, I was having a conversation with my good friend who lives in Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I said, you know, there seems to, like, I'm seeing a pattern of the African Americans who have completed programs.
Yeah.
Completed, and all of them, for some reason, all have deviance with them. They all have something wrong with them that we can't listen to them.
Like, hey, listen, you got Shadid, you graduate, you got Mufti, graduate. These guys got degrees in Hadith science and fiqh science. You got Ali Davis and Abu Sajid, young African American men from ghettos, Philadelphia, Newark, New Jersey. You got brothers from Detroit, all over the country, right? I know at least about 80 graduates from University of Medina. Most of them are African American young men on the Sunnah. We know nothing about them, and the ones that are famous, where we can't take from them. And you're looking at all these young men who came back, studied, got all these academics, and we can't take from them. But I can take from some guy from some island in Europe, who has no education. It's deep, man.
You know something? This speaks to our the pathology of self-hate that we have amongst ourselves. The brother Ali Davis, you mentioned his name.
Yeah.
The program that he graduated from, that if you graduate from that program, to my understanding, and if he's out there and you know you could run this by him, but this is what I understand to be correct or understand to be true, that he's qualified to be a judge. The program that he graduated from is a it's a very, very academically rigorous program that the faint of heart is not going to survive, but he survived it. And if you survive that program, that you're qualified to be a judge in Islamic issues. But you can come back to America and you just a Negro who went overseas for a couple years. You're not really important. You're not really qualified. And for the life of me, I can't wrap my brain around that. But I understand why we think that way, and we've been taught we think that way because we've been trained over hundreds of years to look at each other as less.
We've been trained to depend on others except ourselves.
Exactly. You can. I mean, how could you not listen to Tahir Wyatt?
That's what I'm saying.
How could you not? I mean, like, look, I don't expect perfection from anybody, but being an academic myself and having gone through the academic process on the undergraduate and the graduate level, I understand what it takes to be successful in academia, and I'm telling you, it's not easy.
No.
So for him to get to the level that he's at, man, I take my hat off, Akhi. I take my hat off, and I'm gonna keep my mouth shut, and I'm gonna listen to what you had to teach me.
Exactly. I don't have to agree with everything you say, but I respect your level.
Yeah, you have to. How can you not?
You gotta respect his level.
How can you not? You look at Mufti. I've never met that brother. I've never met Tahir. Some of the other brothers that mentioned. We've spoken via phone or whatever, and I have to give my hat. I have to take my hat off to academic achievement, and we don't understand that. If you look at the elites of the society, and I'm talking about Islam to the side, I'm talking about just the elites of the Western society, almost all of them are college educated. They have education.
Mm.
So for us to diminish that academic achievement to just, whatever, they went overseas for a couple of years, but he got a problem. Well, who said he got a problem? Somebody else in England. What?
Yeah,
I'm
that's
not
crazy.
trying to hear that. Yeah, I'm not trying to hear that. I'm not trying to hear that.
I mean,
Especially if he's here, if they're here in our communities putting in work.
that's what I'm saying. That's the stuff.
Putting in
I mean,
work.
it's amazing that we have, for example, for some reason, black folk have this issue where it's like we're blinded to our own success. For example, um, in Philadelphia, two historical things happened in the last 2 or 3 years. An Islamic library in the middle, in the heart of Gotham City. I mean, that itself, but our people made no sound of it. I mean, in fact, they told us that we could shut it down. We didn't have permission to open it. The scholars did. What scholars said we can have a library. Then we have the Muslim Family Center, first of its kind, that's dealing with the social problems of the ghettos of Philadelphia, inside of Philadelphia. And nothing. I mean, but if somebody's having a lecture in London, it's the biggest thing in the world. And we tote their success. And it's as if we've been trained to hate anything that we do. But if somebody else that doesn't look like us does it, it's like we an Eagles fan when we play in Dallas. You know what I mean?
But that goes back to our history that we bring prior to Islam.
Mhm.
We don't bring a self-love. We don't see, or we don't bring an appreciation of those like us, because many times we've been pitted against each other just to survive. We've been put in a situation where you put two dogs in a cage and there's one bowl of food, one of y'all not gonna make it. That's how we live many times. One of us ain't gonna make it.
Somebody
So
ain't making
we
it
don't
out.
have, right. So we don't sometimes have the time or the luxury to cultivate that brotherly love, to cultivate that collective efficacy, that social cohesion, that communal, connection. We don't have time for that. We're living hand to mouth, especially if you live in a high poverty, high crime area.
Exactly.
Education is not given importance because we don't have time or the luxury of long-term vision. Does that make sense? We haven't learned as a people, it's called deferred gratification. Are you familiar with this term, deferred gratification?
No.
Okay, deferred gratification is your ability to look long term. Okay, if I do this now and I stay on track to do this, at the end, I'll get this. We haven't been we haven't been taught that. Whereas with white people who have the ability and the luxury to do that, they teach their children deferred gratification. I'm going to take care of this. I'm going to take care of your school. All I need you to do is go. Get your degree. I'm going to pay the bills. You don't have to worry about it. But in our situation, look, we want what we want right now. I need to look fly right now. I need them Jordans right now. I need the rims for my car right now. And I'm not trying to, come down on all black people. Obviously, that's not what I'm saying. I'm speaking in general terms, not absolute terms.
General problems that exist in our community.
Right. But if you look at the economic force or the economic of black folks, we make up a large portion of the economy of America by way of how we spend money. We spend money on everything, but we don't, put that same money toward, instead of buying Jordans, I'm gonna put this money away for my kids' school. Every month I'm gonna put away X amount of dollars specifically for my child's school. So when my child gets to be of college age, he's gonna be able to go sit in classes and not have to worry about money. But white folks do that.
Yeah, they do.
White folks do that. And that's not something that is innately or inherently in their DNA that they know to do
They've
that.
been
That's
trained to do
something
that.
that they've learned over generations of success.
Yeah.
Over generations of success. And this is something that we need to learn as well. We need to learn how to keep our money to us. We need to learn how not to desire Jordans and you know, $200 blue jeans and you know, keeping up with all of the different fads that are basically created in order to take our money. We need to learn to not desire these things and say, you know something, I'm gonna take that money, I'm gonna put it away because I'm gonna buy a house. I'm going to have an asset to pass down to my children. You know, if my children don't want the house, they can sell the house and split it and take the money and go to college or go buy another house or move out of the country or do whatever they want to do. But that deferred gratification is something that we as a collective really need to learn to attach ourselves to.
You know, I noticed something by, you know, just going through life, traveling, being in different countries, and even being amongst different people here and stuff like that. I noticed that the other tribes of people, and generally speaking, we're not talking about absolutes here, but we're talking about general things. Like I had a foster mother and father. I used to live in the suburbs of Philadelphia for a couple of years, and I noticed something about the people in the neighborhood. One thing I noticed is that they don't see a lot of failure. So you don't pass on a bunch of failure, meaning they look at the men in their family. Most people have a college education or they have a pretty decent job. They're able to establish a lifestyle for their kids and family, so they watch generational success. But I looked in the ghettos where I'm from, and where most of us probably come from, is that I seen generational failure. I didn't see my uncles have success except that they were drug dealers on the street. So
Right.
when you see this ghost of failure, this constant, almost every male in my family failed. When you constantly see that, except maybe one or two made it out,
You fall in line.
you fall in line because the reality is there's a stench and a ghost of failure from generation to generation. So success becomes the next pack. Success becomes I can make 1,000 a week selling heroin. Success becomes I'm gonna rob somebody to get this. So success is now based on how you look, not about generational success, because you don't believe that you're gonna be successful. You believe you got a short time to make some money and you're dead and in jail.
Right. That speaks to us not being able to define our own agency. The general hegemonic stereotype that's given to us is we don't define what success is. They define what success is for us, and we accept it. We stay in our lane. Our lane, like you said, generational failure, prison, lack of education. All of these things are that's where you at. That's your lane. Stay in it. Our lane is generational wealth, social upward mobility, high levels of social capital and cultural capital. These are all things that are for them, but not for us. And how they get these things, they teach to their children so that it's perpetuated and moved on from generation to generation. Whereas we are not taught that. Like you just said, your uncles, your brothers, and all that, you sort of fall in line and you accept the stereotype. You accept, well, this is my reality. I used to work some years ago in a jail, and I dealt with juveniles. And, I used to talk to them, and we'd sit around the table, and I would talk to them sometimes when they were sitting in the common area when they weren't locked in their cells. And all of them had this, they knew all of the Tupac lyrics. At that time, they knew all of the Master P lyrics. I mean, they beat on the tables and knew, and all of them could go.
Biggie Smalls.
Yeah, all of that. But if a kid came in and he was articulate and he could complete a sentence without saying, nah, I mean, he was more articulate.
Yeah.
He was the one who was beat up. He was the one who was ridiculed.
You're talking white.
He was yeah, exactly. Could you do me a favor and get the heater for me over there? Okay. So how we understand what a real man is has been defined for us.
Mm-hmm.
It's not we don't define our own agency. It's the definition that other people put on us that we just readily accept.
Yeah, exactly. You're absolutely right, Sheikh. SubhanAllah. Well, it's Maghrib time for me, so I want to do another part. I want this to be the only one. I want us to try to do a series of talks. So, like I said, I'm gonna go do my get my questions together, and I want to make another time because this is, I think, a very important issue that we have to use Quran and Sunnah to understand. Because if we don't, we're going to get extreme or either on one or two sides. Either we're not going to love ourselves enough, or we're gonna go overboard.
Right.
So we have to find that middle, and I appreciate your time, brother. Man, it was a deep. I think it's a conversation that needs to be had. I think that now that we're starting to get out of the cultism, the Salafi cultism, getting to pure Salafiyah and things like the night shift and things like Shadid and things like Mufti and all the Abdul Haq Bakers and the breakdown of the cult mind is starting to alleviate itself from our people. So I think now, but the vacuum, it could be a vacuum if we're not careful. We can go to extremes.
We can go overboard, and we can become, everything is about black, and Sunnah will take a back seat.
Exactly.
And the Sunnah will take a back seat, and we definitely do not want that.
Everything will be okay, and nothing will be bad.
Right. One thing that I think has to speak to our success, or something that we have to come to terms with, is that there has to be an intersectionality between the people who have expertise in deen and the people who have expertise in dunya sciences. There has to be, because our communities are disenfranchised and virtually obliterated. So it's going to take people with expertise from different sciences and different fields to actually help piece these things back together. So one thing that, go ahead.
You made a good point there. And when I was in Egypt, Sheikh Mahmoud Luthi Amr, he had his school, he had a whole community there, right? And one of the things I noticed, you know how we in our minds here, there's a religious priesthood in our communities, and they run everything, the finances, the masjid, everything. But when I looked at when I went and seen who was in the Sheikh's circle that ran that community, okay, you had him, Sheikh Mahmoud Luthi Amr, you had Sheikh Muqsim Malouk. They were the religious authorities in the masjid. Then you had doctors, restaurant owners, lawyers. And I'm looking, I'm like, so I see the guy with the suit on, with the beard real low, and I'm looking, he got his glasses on, Egyptian dude, and I'm looking at him. I'm like, why he in a religious circle? You know, because I don't understand what's going on. But over time, I realized that
he's in the keep it moving circle.
Yeah, he had the circle that.
He's in the keep it moving circle.
He had the moving circle that created a whole smorgasbord of success. He had everybody on his team that was able to move in the dunya and the deen. But
that's how you do it.
On our communities, the dais run everything, and that's why. And they're young, they run everything, and they have totally shipwrecked us. And now that we're coming out of that, the ship has all these holes in it, so we find ourselves now plugging all these holes just to keep the boat from totally going in the ocean.
Yep. We have to look for the people who have the specialty in the fields that our community needs help in.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
If a person, we need doctors, we need lawyers, we need, engineers, we need plumbers and carpenters, and, I believe we need sociologists, we need people with the knowledge of these different aspects of the society, because, when I go to Hamtramck, Michigan, I go see Sheikh Abdurrahman Omeisan sometimes when I go back home. And you look in his community, and the Yemenis have that community on lock.
No.
They got the police department. They have city council. Majority of city council is now Yemen, Muslims. Mm-hmm. They control almost all aspects of their community. And they're pretty much self-contained. No. You know what I mean? They're self-reliant. When you're self-reliant, you can call the shots for yourself, and you can really call the shots for what happens or what comes into your community and what goes out of your community. It gives you power.
No.
So we have to begin to mobilize and galvanize the brothers who have specialty, knowledge of all of the different aspects that make a society progressive and vibrant and healthy.
Now, Barakallah fi Sheikh. And before I go, Rashid Abdurrahman Savage said he watching you, brother.
Hey, do me a favor. If you see him, hit him in the chest for me.
Yeah, I'm gonna get him, man. I'm gonna get him. He's a guy. We gonna jump him when we see him, man. So alhamdulillah, Barakallah fi Sheikh, and I'll let you know when I want to do the next topic. I'll send you the questions beforehand, inshallah.
Okay. Inshallah.
Barakallah fi.
Wa fiikum barakallah. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.